Well, I think the biggest obstacle is now its relationship with the United States and secondarily the rest of the world. For years you've talked about self-reliance. How many decades has Beijing talked about self-reliance as a core concept? Well, I think right now it actually has to be on the absolute priority, top of the priority list, for the simple fact that it has seen over the last couple of years how its technology companies have been hampered, in some ways nearly killed, by U.S. export restrictions and other types of measures that have stopped certain technologies from entering Beijing and the supply chain. So I think that the most important thing right now is that whereas that has been talk in the past, now they really have to be worried about the state of their technology sector and manufacturing sector, and specifically their semiconductors, without a more of a domestic reliance push.
Right, this R&D spend in technology, 7% plus for the next 5 years, is that enough? I mean, they said a lot, of course. They also talked about anti-monopoly pressures being strengthened. So they covered a lot of ground there. But your key takeaway in terms of how much have they signaled to the market on technology self-reliance?
Well, I mean, the question is whether they're going to spend it well. I mean, what's happened over the last 5 to 10 years has been the announcement of enormous funds for technology and specific funds for semiconductor buildup. And where have the funds gone? They've gone to random companies that weren't able to deliver, that weren't as advanced as promised. A whole cottage industry of small companies were created basically over the last several years in order to take in these funds, and they weren't producing semiconductors. So it's less the R&D spending itself, and rather whether there's a very thoughtful way of directing that spending towards companies that are actually going to advance their interests.